Hello and welcome to An Old Man Watches. And today I'm going to be talking about the 1974 thriller The Parallax View, starring Warren Beatty. And Beatty plays reporter Joe Frady. And when an ex-lover of Joe approaches him and tells him that she fears for his life, he isn't really much concerned by this news. His ex-lover has always been something of a drama queen, and her story seems far-fetched. She claims to have been one of several witnesses of an assassination, and that now all of the witnesses are being murdered, one after another. He brushes it off, but he starts to reconsider when said ex-lover turns up dead, as you maybe would. So he puts his investigative journalistic skills to use and begins to piece together evidence of a secret conspiracy, one that is dedicated to finding and recruiting people with the right temperament to be assassins. But who is behind this conspiracy? And perhaps more importantly, what is the agenda driving them? What are they hoping to achieve? Joe's attempts to uncover the truth will quickly lead him into danger. But he's not a man to give up easily. And he's also, far from oblivious to the fact that this could be the biggest story of the decade. Still, can one man, no matter how brave and resourceful, really expose the highly organised, sophisticated conspiracy, particularly one with such extensive resources? So, first things first, I want to say The Parallax View is a really solid thriller, and it's well worth a watch. Some aspects of its production and style will definitely seem dated by today's standards. It is nearly 50 years old, after all. But nonetheless, it's a well-crafted film, and I very much enjoyed it. And I'm saying all this up front because if you haven't seen The Parallax View and you like to watch movies unspoiled and you think you might want to watch this, please stop this video now and go watch the movie before you come back. Because beyond this point, I'm going to touch on some themes and elements of the film and its production that will probably give some insights or hints into how it unfolds. So, if you want a totally unspoiled experience, stop now. You have been warned. Right, still with me? Then let's proceed. So, in 1999, a movie came out named Arlington Road, and it featured Tim Robbins and Joan Cusack, both of whom I really like as actors, and I duly headed off to the cinema to see it. As it turned out, though, I didn't much care for the film. I found the plot preposterous. My reaction was basically, anyone smart enough to make that plan work is smart enough to come up with a much better plan. I mention this because after seeing The Parallax View, I both like Arlington Road even less than I did before, but I also feel like I much better understand what the film was trying to do. Because basically, the two movies both start from a similar place and they both travel to a similar destination. I would honestly be very surprised if no one involved in producing Arlington Road was a big fan of The Parallax View. Like, somebody involved almost certainly was. For me, though, the key difference between the movies is a simple one. The Parallax View is much more compelling, coherent, and convincing in unfolding its story and delivering an end-to-end experience as a film. This is definitely not me saying you should see Arlington Road because having watched The Parallax View, I now appreciate it much better. I don't. Watch this movie. This movie treads a similar path, but does it much better, and 25 years earlier, for that matter. Secondly, The Parallax View is very much a product of its time. It's not an upbeat film. It's not optimistic about human nature in general. It starts from the supposition that many of us are venal, lazy, and corruptible, and that is particularly true of those who have or are aspiring to have power. Even our hero is deeply flawed. Joe Frady is no unstained white knight of a hero. While he does have some noble impulse behind his pursuit of this conspiracy, he's also driven by guilt and by ambition. Of course, compared to the conspiracy he's trying to uncover, Joe is practically a saint, but only compared to them. And I think this is likely a product of the time in which the film was made. The early 70s were a time of immense turmoil. The United States was in the final stages of leaving Vietnam, and a long and costly war that had ultimately been lost, despite attempts then and now to redefine American goals in Vietnam so they could claim victory. It was also the era of the Watergate scandal, which had revealed rampant corruption right to the top of the US government and which brought down President Nixon. And also, it was the time of the first oil crisis, a crisis that caused recession, excessive inflation, and a stock market crash that all combined to form the biggest setback to the United States economy since the Great Depression 40 years earlier. This is a movie that it does reflect the wounded psyche of the Western world at the time it was made. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it a good film or a bad one, but what it does mean is that because it is a good film, it captures that sense of turmoil and doubt and pessimism, and it really does profit from them. So that's something to consider when watching the movie. It's not upbeat. It's good, but it's not upbeat. And finally, the 70s were a time of political and social turmoil and of grave uncertainty about the future. Perhaps not to the apocalyptic extent of the early 80s, when we basically all sat around waiting for the world to end. But that time, that sense of turmoil and uncertainty is probably something that resonates today, as we see an assault on women's rights, on trans rights, on ethnic minorities, and essentially on anyone who isn't sufficiently white, male, and wealthy enough. But despite those similarities, the past is a different country. The 70s were also a long time ago. And yeah, in some ways they feel like a different world. And the Parallax View provides some fascinating examples of those differences. There's a scene where Joe Frady strolls onto a commercial airline flight. The plane takes off, and then he buys his ticket. In the air, he's telling them, where he wants to go, and they're taking his money. It's really strange, given the extensive security and screening that we must now undergo to fly, to see an airplane treated essentially like a local bus service. And again, that's not something that directly impacts the quality of the film, but the view that we get of how life was nearly 50 years ago is nonetheless an eye-opening one, and it increased my engagement with the film. I found it really interesting to see the things the film depicted, and that added to the richness of the experience. So The Parallax View is a really strong thriller. It's not the world's most cheerful film by any imagination, and if you like happy, upbeat stuff, you should probably steer clear. But if you want something that's challenging and interesting, it's definitely worth your time. So that's The Parallax View. Next time, something a bit different. Robert Rodriguez's 2010 grindhouse action offering, Machete. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.